CatholicPsych Show. It's Monday mailbag. We're going to try and do this every Monday outside of our upcoming media fast, where we answer your questions. If you have questions that you want to send to us, please send them to mailbag@CatholicPsych.com. We're going to avoid all the news today. There's news, but we're avoiding it. Dr. Greg, how was your weekend?
It's great. I think your mic is switched over though. You gotta pop it back over. It sounds like. But weekend was awesome. I had such a good weekend. It was rejuvenating. It was refreshing. We had a homily yesterday. Our pastor was preaching on leisure and taking seriously our job to intentionally make Sunday a day of leisure. And for whatever reason, there was a significant grace, and it pierced the heart. And I feel like I'm a new man this morning, starting off strong.
What did you? That's great. What was so leisurely about your Sunday? What did you?
Well, it wasn't just the leisure; it was the intentionality about it. It was like, all right, we have to take, and like I spent like an hour last night recalibrating my schedule. I created a new daily schedule, and this morning I'm off to the races already. It was awesome. So it was yesterday was leisurely. It was just really intentional family time. You know, playing games, listening to the kids playing the piano. Did some stuff outside, just playing outside, you know, just
restorative,
like normal stuff, right? Basic stuff, but very restorative when it's intentional. It was not accidental. We didn't stumble into our Sunday. Yeah, and now I'm not stumbling into the week.
Yeah, it's different than when your leisure time, like within your leisure time, there's this encroaching, intrusive pressure from all the other things that are going on in your life, and you're not able to be present with your children listening to the piano or working outside or whatever it is. So you are where you are, Catholic mindfully.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's what I write about, teach. It's what we preach. It's what we use in our work as mentors. But you slip, you know, it kind of slips out of grasp sometimes. And personally, I really needed a reset.
Yes.
And, you know, something I want to talk about more another time, but yeah, maybe it'll come up in the mailbag, but you know, we have good habits, we build good habits, and then it's like we store up savings in our savings accounts. And then sometimes we need to, you know, tap into the savings accounts. You know, it's like the rainy day fund.
Mm-hmm.
Life has gotten a little bit crazy over the last 6 months, and I was tapping into the savings account. So it's starting to deplete.
You're talking about your emotional bank account?
You know, all across the board, emotional, spiritual, but actually financial, family life, just kind of across the board. So it was just great to hit the reset and kind of recalibrate and start making deposits instead of withdrawals.
Well, that's fantastic. It's so funny. I was talking to a buddy this weekend and I asked him if he had the bandwidth for something. And I was actually asking if he had the emotional bandwidth for something.
Oh, yeah.
And he had no idea what I was talking about. I was like, oh, you haven't hung out with a psychologist in a while. The emotional bandwidth. You feel like you have the headspace to engage in this activity. That was my question. Well, that's awesome to hear. That's really great that you're recalibrating. This is evidence of your humanity, which the people love to see. That you're on the journey.
Plenty of evidence for my humanity. Let me just say that right now. How about you? How was your weekend?
Good. We are in the process of a third birthday extravaganza.
Yes.
For my daughter. Yes. Yesterday was her birthday. So she got her nails done with her mom for the first time. That was great.
Oh, so cute.
Yeah. My son actually, I mean, not because it was his birthday, but we had some milestones. My son got his first haircut with his dad at like an official haircut place rather than me just with clippers, like ruining
so
things.
Important. Such an awesome milestone of masculinity. Going to the barber shop with dad.
Yep. And then we had tonight we have her birthday party. So like the extended family's coming over. And I had said to them on Thursday, we usually have a family dinner night on Thursdays. So I said, we have enough toys. Don't bring any toys when you come over for the birthday party. And then everyone yelled at me for stealing their joy.
How dare you make it about your family and daughter instead of them?
Yes, how dare I? So I expect a lot of toys to be coming into the house today. Toys that will be used for at least 48 hours. At least. before they just accumulate in a corner somewhere.
Well, if you need directions to the local Goodwill, I'm sure Barbara, my wife, could tell you where. She knows all of the statewide Goodwills.
It's an opportunity to give to the less fortunate. That's why we got a picture it.
That's right.
All right, let's jump into the mailbag here. Okay, so some of these questions are context based, and I might need to give a little context to the question because they grow from previous discussions that you and I have had. So Paula Cianci asked, this is the question. What if you are single? What could be similarly transformative experience other than usual nieces, nephews? Not everyone has them. So this is reflective of a conversation we had about how psychological maturity comes by way of being a parent. And if you don't have biological children, I believe you had said, well, be a parent to your niece or nephew. This person, Paula, is asking like, well, what if I don't have a niece and nephew? How can I continue to grow psychologically and spiritually if I don't actually have someone small to take care of?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it just speaks to the bigger issue of God's will. And providentially, God wants all of us to grow and develop and mature psycho-spiritually and emotionally. And so if the circumstances of your life are not providing the quote-unquote normal pathways to personal human development, we have to trust that God is going to provide other opportunities.
Right. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I mean, it's a collaborative effort. So we have to sort of work together with God. But we have to start off with the idea that God wants us to grow. He will provide opportunities for us to grow. And therefore, if we open ourselves up and start discerning actively, how can I grow? He will show up. We can guarantee that. And when we talk about it for the sake of parents or for the sake of people who are married or have kids, well, we're kind of making the point from the other angle to say, if you have kids, you should be growing in maturity. It's not to say you can only grow in maturity if you have kids. It's like, an illogical syllogism where it's like we're not making one conclusion based on the opposite side of the statement.
All apples are fruits.
Exactly.
But not all fruits are apples.
Exactly. So, this is the natural, normal way. God built it into our biology. He built it in, marriage is called the primordial sacrament. It was a sacrament before Jesus was incarnate. It's just the natural path for humans. But he wants all of us to grow. So if we're, for whatever reason, not living on that path, then there will be a way for us to grow. So that's kind of a packed statement. But, if you are married and then you abandon your family and you get divorced and run off to like pursue your own self and find your truth or whatever, and now you're like, well, I'm single, I don't have any kids. Like, well, I kind of think you missed the boat on that one, but maybe go back to your family. But there's lots of people who have tried to. There's so many young adults and older adults now are like, they're just dating, they're out there, they're single, they're trying to find somebody. It's not working, it's not happening. It's probably worth a whole nother episode. But
yes.
Whatever your circumstances are, God is going to meet you today where you are today and help you grow. So you gotta open yourself up to ask him what that can look like.
Yeah. And we don't know the details of every situation, the uniqueness of everyone's experience, but it stands to reason that because we trust in a good God, if you look around hard enough, he's going to give you some opportunity to grow and give of yourself and evolve into kind of a parenting role with someone, even if it's at work, maybe in your hobby space. It may be a niece and nephew. It might be biological children. It might be just a mentor-mentee kind of dynamic, but somewhere someone is looking up to you, whether you like it or not.
How about volunteer opportunities?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. At Goodwill.
Like what kind of, because I'm sure this is also just, let's get more practical. Like, what kind of volunteer opportunities would afford the same kind of psycho-emotional development, psycho-spiritual development?
I mean, you're asking me literally?
Yeah, literally.
Coaching, maybe like not like professional coaching, but like be a coach of a kid's sport or something like that.
Oh yeah, lots of opportunities for growth and patience there.
Oh yeah. Or being a mentor to your friends' kids. I went over your house not too long ago, and I was teaching your kids a game, and I could see like all your different kids at different developmental stages, and
Yeah.
both of them were relating to the game that in a way that's appropriate to what they needed to learn
Yeah.
as a child. And
Yeah.
like just being there in that room, it's like, wow, this is ripe with opportunity
So
to help
many
these kids get
opportunities.
to the next level. And that's just playing a game, with my friends' kids.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, any kind of volunteer, you could volunteer at a soup kitchen,
Yeah.
or something we used to do as a friar when I was with the friars. We did this huge turkey handout for Thanksgiving, and then everything around Christmas. Obviously, these things go on all year long, but I was always so validated and sort of, I guess just I felt so blessed to be in the presence of so many great families and other young adults and people who are volunteers coming to join the friars in those outreaches.
Yeah.
And you could see like some of these homeless people, some of the, people on the street, whatever that would be the beneficiaries of this, they're not the most grateful, charitable, easy to handle, easygoing people to be around. And so it takes a lot of patience sometimes to like show up and be like, I like spending my Saturday for you. And these people are like complaining about like the gravy.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
Dave Wither says parish religious education. If you volunteer, that's a great idea. Parishes are always asking for catechism teachers, catechesis.
Oh yeah, big time.
Volunteer for helping the kids learn the faith at the parish. That's a great one.
Yeah, I think we could add a little bit too from our model here, where it's a principle of the way in which we mentor people. It's an interpersonal principle that whenever there's some kind of hierarchical difference between two people, whenever there's a power differential, and that could be like literally a power differential, like someone at work who's one's subordinate, or it's just like you're going to somebody for help, even a therapist or a medical doctor, or a physical therapist, a masseuse, whatever you're going to someone for help, you project some of your unconscious stuff with your parents onto that dynamic.
Yeah.
So whenever you have someone that's coming to you for help or a subordinate in any way, they're going to bring all their stuff with their parents and make assumptions about you and the dynamic going on between the two of you. So like you always have an opportunity to reparent somebody in a way, like maybe in a way that was much more loving than the way they were treated as children.
Yeah. And, I think this is actually kind of stumbling onto this, but this is not just for people who don't have kids. This is kind of a parenting hack. If you want to know a parenting hack, I mean, we've already been talking about it. You've already alluded to it, but if you want your kids to have other formative experiences, like branch out of your own family structure. Like when I have you come over the house, that's like such a novel experience that the kids eat up whatever you're presenting to them. And if you want your kids to have these kinds of experiences, if you take them, like there are families that came to help us with the food handouts. Like these are families with kids. I'm sure they're talking about virtues and things they're building character at home, but then they go out of the home to have these novel experiences, and these lessons land even deeper. Yep. So it's not meant to be the either or, the black and white, where it's like I either have my own kids or I'm single and I don't have kids. It actually, we're all a community, and we have to like find ways to deepen the connections between people with kids, people without kids. Actually, we all kind of have the kids, without distorting it with like Joe Biden does, saying they're all our they're our children. Like, no, that doesn't mean you block the parents out from knowing what's happening in the schools, but it does mean we should actually. I had to
principles
bring
of
Biden back in.
He dropped out of the race, guys. We're not going to talk about it. Principle of subsidiarity, though, right? Like at the lowest level,
yes,
should be the
subsidiarity and solidarity. We are all in it together. These are all our kids. We are all each other's brothers and sisters. We are our brothers' keepers. We are together in this. So it's not just a spiritual maxim. It's like, how does this practically make sense in our life? Yeah. And this is a beautiful, wonderful thing.
It takes a village to raise a child. I love when you enter into those school systems where you can see that the teachers take these principles very, very seriously. Like they come to love your children. And it's like this shared community, like among the faculty of all of us faculty members in collaboration with the parents to like educate these children. Like we are all taking ownership. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it is.
All right, let's move on. So I got, we've talked about this before a little bit. This is such a hot button topic in the Catholic world. We have to revisit it because I got 3 questions about it. It's like
Okay.
people want to know. So I'll go through all 3 questions, and then I actually have maybe a way of tying up the question before we get into it. So here's the first question. Can you help me understand? This is from Sebastian Bordeaux. Can you help me understand the distinction between being a perfectionist, which is bad, and that God calls us to be perfect? This seems like a contradiction to me. Next question from Nicole. Great convo. Can you cover scrupulosity? Thanks. 3B. Curious about recommendations for dealing with preteen scrupulosity involving confidence, self-assuredness, doubts about doing the right thing, etc. Any info would be great. Thanks for your time. So before we go into these distinctions and talk a little bit about scrupulosity, I want to ask you this question. Why do you think that, in my clinical experience, alongside problems with pornography, I think that scrupulosity is probably the most common thing that I've seen. Why do you think scrupulosity is such a struggle for people in the Catholic world? Maybe the number one struggle of people who are striving to live their faith.
Well, I think it's one of the only disorders that masks itself as ordered.
Yes.
It's very, very easy to misunderstand this disorder as something that makes us more holy. Mm-hmm. It's so easy. We can read it into the lives of the saints. We know that a lot of saints actually struggled with it. A lot of saints struggled with scrupulosity. And it gets really messy when we think about what it is to be a saint. A saint means that there's a canonical process after a person dies.
Yes.
And then goes through a number of verifications that the church proclaims this person, we now know this person is now, whatever now means in heaven, but in time, we can say that this person is in heaven with God.
And we can pray to them for their intercession directly, publicly.
Exactly. Now, that does not mean by any stretch of the imagination that everything they said, did, or wrote in their earthly life was perfect. So you have these saints who had certain behaviors that then become sort of the model, and it's misplaced.
Yes.
Because they're like, oh, well, St. Catherine of Siena, did X, Y, Z. Well, St. Therese said X, Y, Z. It was like, just because you come up with an example or you read something, oh, well, this saint, because of holy obedience, she scrubbed the floor with her toothbrush and then used it to brush her teeth and It's like, let's not just see everything from the lives of the saints as gospel.
Sometimes they contradict each other.
Right. And so, exactly. And so we have to realize, we're all imperfect in this world. And then the process is supposed to be getting us to heaven. And then maybe once, and then who knows, if a saint actually goes through purgatory, it's the thing. Being a saint does not mean you skipped purgatory.
I never thought about that before. It's saying we're messing with time and now, what now is, right?
Exactly.
They are now in heaven.
Right. It means, who knows, what that actually looks like, the purgative process.
Purification.
Who knows? Maybe it's an instantaneous experience. Who knows what actually happens in time and space to die and then be in heaven. And the process has to have a purification in it to sort of clean up whatever was not cleaned up in our own offerings and sacrifices and abandonment in this world before we died. But so when the church says this person is a saint, it doesn't mean they skipped purgatory. It means they're past purgatory now. They're in heaven
now.
So,
Whatever now means.
This is what we have, and so we don't want to read the saints' lives as gospel. Number one. Number two, let's go to the gospel, because people always say well, it says to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. That was the first question you asked.
Yeah.
Let's actually read the scripture. And we go back to Matthew chapter 5, and we read that it's actually about forgiving each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you only forgive your friends, what are you doing more than others? Don't the Gentiles do the same? In other words, Christ is saying, don't just love your friends and then keep hating your enemies. But he wants us to, now this is what he's calling to mind the perfection of God's love. He's saying, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And then he goes on to say that he shines like the sun on the weeds and the wheat.
Hmm.
So the idea of perfection is not meant to be applied to every little moment of our thoughts and feelings and actions and all these things. It's specifically talking about the way we love others and forgive others.
Yes, and perfect fidelity to God, right? That's what we want to achieve, shoot for.
But that's not what the scripture is talking about. When
Mhm.
people say I have to be perfect like God is perfect, read it in context. The only time Jesus says be perfect in this light, in this way, is specifically talking about who are you opening your heart to forgive.
Hmm.
It's literally the context of the whole passage.
Yeah.
So we can't hijack this word out of the context of where it actually is in scripture and then apply it to everything.
Yes.
In fact, everywhere else it makes every opposite point. It's like Paul's wrestling with the weakness in his flesh, and then his answer is that God's glory is made strong. His strength is made clear in our weakness.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of our imperfection that God shines through. It's in his perfection.
Yeah. I think of for this question, two things come to my mind: the spiritual and the psychological. On the spiritual side of things, I probably have less to say here, but I do know that the evil one does want to tempt us to move away from God whenever he can. And just like, when we do well in the spiritual life, that he's waiting there whispering in our ear, you did so well. Like he tempts us to pride right afterwards. I think it's true also of striving for spiritual excellence and him making it sort of wrap us up and entangle us with scrupulosity and unhealthy fears about God. And it's problematic in that way. Psychologically, the way I think about how this develops is that oftentimes children, from the perspective of a child, they don't have the nuance of understanding the true messaging coming from a parent. So they, like, a lot of times communication to a child comes through like nonverbal communication or facial reactions. And somewhere along the way, the child learns that they have to earn love. Now, from the parent's perspective, the parent isn't saying you have to earn my love. The parent loves the child no matter what. But there's when a kid comes home from school and, the parent may say, I love you no matter what you do. But still, what they communicate to the child is, great job with the A+. And then other times, how come you got a B+ on this? So the child is equating like emotions with love.
Right.
And so they may think, unless I get that A+, I'm not loved.
Right.
Now, does that mean we shouldn't have our children strive for excellence? No, of course not. We want children to do good and avoid evil, and we parent them such that things will go well for them. But our love for them is not dependent upon whether or not they succeed or fail. I think one of the best opportunities to combat perfectionism and scrupulosity is precisely when our children screw up. That's when we rush right in with that unconditional love, which contradicts any messaging around conditional love.
Right.
So they can separate, like, listen, I'm telling you this because I want you to do well in your life, in your spiritual life, in your professional life, your academic life, your social life, whatever it is. So I'm going to parent you.
Right.
But even if you screw up, like, of course not. I think when I'm working with clients in this space, I ask them to think about people that they love, that they really love, and ask themselves, is there anything that person can do to make you not love them anymore?
Right.
And the answer is almost like invariably, no, of course not. I love them no matter what. And even if they screw up, I'm hurting because I love them. Like, well, that's how God loves us. And that's hopefully how your parents loved you, or they at least should have loved you. So that, I think, combats the perfectionism.
Right. That's 100% it. And it goes back to where the line is in the scriptures, because we're supposed to love others the way that we are loved. And it's this sort of mirroring of this logical statement, and it's, giving what we're receiving. So we have to understand that as the underlying principle. And people, again, because of their psychological imprints in their patterns and the way that they've learned these things, been miseducated. They take the second half and they turn it into the first half. It's like, I have to love in order to be loved. Actually, It's because we're loved that we can love. And then when we're supposed to love others perfectly, we're supposed to be sharing what we've received. So we're receiving the perfect love of God the Father. So the answer is in the problem. When people are like, well, it says I'm supposed to love perfectly. Like, but the answer to that is in the statement already. It's like, it's because you're loved perfectly. So when you're offering this as a problem, it's because you don't understand that you're loved perfectly. Yep. If you understood that you were loved perfectly, there would be no problem.
Right. And
the problem would be, let me say that differently. It would be a problem in terms of like moral development. Sure. Like we're growing, we're trying to learn more. We're trying to become better. We're becoming the saints God created us to be. But it would not be the same level and depth of psychological terror that comes from not being loved in the first place.
Yeah. I think there's something. I always want to be careful here when I use this term, but it feels like there's something Trinitarian in the idea that once we're filled up with being loved, we experience that love. We're filled to the brim, that it has to overflow into fruitfulness and to love others.
Sure.
Right. You think of like the Father and the Son spirating into the Holy Spirit, the love exchange between them, or a husband and a wife, it becomes a new person. But even just between us and God, when we feel that love first, that moves us to act. It's not like I need to earn it and I have to act first, therefore to earn the love, right? It's the other way around, like you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, moving on. I do not have, this would be a good one for you. A list. What is a list of needs that you should get from a spouse with explanation? Please and thank you. Do you have a list of needs that a spouse should get from their other spouse?
This is it's so fascinating.
This is a book, isn't it?
I wish but it's not really. I wish I knew the age of the person writing this, because I almost can guarantee, well, I can't say that. There's plenty of people in all generations who would ask that question, but that is a common thought process for Gen Z and younger.
Take care of my needs.
It's all like, here's the one need that you need from a spouse. They are breathing. Because your vow is that you're going to make this person, you're vowing yourself to make this person the recipient of your gift of self until death do you part. Mm-hmm. That's all you guaranteed of yourself. That's the vow. Mm-hmm. So a need, we got to be really clear about what we mean by need and what people think they're using that word to define.
I want my wife to make me a sandwich, but I don't need her to make me a sandwich. I will live if she doesn't make me a sandwich.
And not just live, but you can be, this is really important, like, because now we're all about like healthy relationship and how do we have a flourishing, thriving marriage, and how do we have but here's the thing. You can have a flourishing, healthy. This is actually really startling for some people. People really don't get this, and it's shocking when people don't. I was just talking to a friend of mine actually, and this point came up even as we were talking, and it was a recorded conversation. But it was, who are you responsible for in your marriage?
Oh, don't you love the quote? It's my job to get my spouse to heaven.
It's so false.
I get why it exists though, because I think that kind of quote is designed to get people thinking about the spiritual life in their marriage at all.
100%. I get it. Yes. I get it.
Yes.
But if I'm of the mind that the healthiest education is one that is consistent through and through, whether you're teaching a kindergartner or a PhD student. Well, and it's got to be consistent. I don't think we should be making statements that end up being false once you get to a complex enough, sophisticated enough level of education.
Right.
It is flatly 100%, 1,000% false. That is your responsibility or job to get your spouse to heaven.
Nope. It's their job to get themselves to heaven.
You are 100% only responsible for your own path to heaven, your own soul. At our final judgment, it will be between us and Jesus. Now, how did we contribute to other people's lives? How did we support other people's lives, other paths to heaven? Certainly, educating our children is a huge part of our responsibility for us to get to heaven. When we're facing Jesus in the final judgment, did you do your job as a parent to educate your children in the faith and bring them up in virtue and character? Did you provide vulnerability and intimacy and sharing of self in such a way as to give your spouse the best chance possible so that he or she could, be free to grow in their own spiritual life and grow in their path to heaven? Absolutely, 100%. But we have to be really clear about this. So at the end of the day, what we need is a person who can receive us as a self-gift. And that person might not emotionally be receiving us. That person might not physically be receiving us. That person might not spiritually be receiving us. But we have a person to continue to make the gift of self to, because that's what we signed up for in our vows. If we care about our spiritual life.
And it's really nice when both people are doing that. And
it's
incredibly painful when one of them is not.
And that's another gift of self. That's another part of the gift of self. And a lot of people are suffering because of that. 100% too, also true. It's very complex.
Yeah.
But we have to, I find that within the context of, somebody who's like really seeking spiritual life and really seeking holiness, when there's conflict in marriage with one person who's really concerned about holiness, there's a misunderstanding of this principle.
Oh yeah.
And in misunderstanding this principle can create more difficulty than the person realizes. And so not all, but a lot of movement and a lot of the problems can be solved by actually reorganizing one's priorities and understanding what one's vow is actually all about.
Yeah.
So that's my answer for, if somebody's already married and then now they're living in this vow.
Yeah, it's a complicated thing where I think control issues can get wrapped up in it. I mean, even with parenting, right? I mean, everything you're saying also applies to our children. It's actually not our responsibility to get our children to heaven. That's a crazy thought for parents who want to do everything, that they love their children so much and they want to do whatever they can to create a context in which their children love God and are connected with God. But there's still free will, and it's still ultimately the child's job. And so I think a lot of parents have a hard time letting go of control and force, whether it's spiritual or academic, whatever, force things on let's just stay in the world of spiritual, but force spirituality on their children when their children may not be ready for it, or may not be ready for it at the level that their parents are, and they don't give this, of course, it's a wonderful thing to share your faith with your children and raise them up in the faith. That's that's your obligation. That is your responsibility. And the way you are assessed will include that criteria. But at the end of the day, to accept if your child is not living a life of faith, that's ultimately God's job to worry about. It's like Mother Teresa, don't worry. It's not between you and them. It's between you and God, and them and God.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's a lot to chew on.
It's a lot, but it's actually one of the biggest parts of that responsibility is to pass the focus on to God.
Yeah.
And it's one of these contradictions of desires where it's like, I want so badly to parent my children well that I hold on to and cling to wrongly my job as a parent. Yeah. Like the idea that I'm the creator, that I'm the one who's in control, that I'm the one who's responsible for what they ultimately do in their heart of hearts. And that's why St. Joseph is a perfect father, because he most perfectly exemplified a father who passes the focus on to God the Father. And John Paul II says, like, he didn't even confuse it with his biology. He's so perfectly passing on the focus to God the Father. He said even his own biology is not going to get in the way to make it confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of the fourth joyful mystery as encapsulating parenting, with Mary and Joseph going to the temple and saying, they're fulfilling the law. He's yours.
Yeah.
He's not ours. We are stewards for a time. And
Yes.
then, like, you go from like wiping their bottom and cleaning their butts, and keeping them alive, to slowly letting go of control.
Right.
As they enter into their young adulthood. And then it has to get to a point where it's like, I'm here if you need me.
Yeah.
I'm just here if you need me, but your decisions are yours. Who you marry, what job you take on, like all of that. I'm here if you need me.
And also, you're always going to be there as an example, as a model of how to be human in this world. So, like, I mean, this comes up all the time too, where people are like, "Well, I'm so ashamed of, the way we lived our marriage in the early days, or when the kids were home, or sometimes there's an affair, or there's bad marriage stuff that happens," and it's like, if you persevere, and then if you have a conversion, if you revert, if you come back to the sacraments, you're giving your kids the best education possible. Look at what happens over time.
Yeah.
Show your kids what it looks like to be 35, 45, 55, revisiting your faith, and give your kids the idea that there's hope. So no matter what they're struggling with at 28, 29, 30, 35, they can think, my parents went through a rough time, but they recovered by 45.
Yeah.
And now they're happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a small example of that. I remember when I was a kid, my mom and dad told me that when they were young, they used to smoke cigarettes and they quit. And when I was young, I smoked cigarettes, but somewhere in my mind was the possibility that, not just the possibility, but the reality. In my mind, it was like, oh, I'm going to quit too.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to quit too. I'm not going to smoke cigarettes forever. So like the efforts that they put in to quit was like open that pathway up for me. And by the way, everything that you're talking about, these is just practice for the big game. What we really need from our parents is how to die well.
Yes.
These stages are important all along the way for modeling, but the greatest modeling they can offer is how well do they die. I want to make sure that's the big game. I want to die well for my kids.
Yes. Oh gosh, yes. That's so important. It's so important. So important. That's the end. That's the telos there of the life of our life here on earth is our death.
St. Joseph, patron of a happy death.
Yes. How perfect is that? It all comes full circle. Yeah, I love that. And I was also going to make this other point that I think, a lot of times in psychology we talk about the negative patterns, the negative learning that happens, miseducation, and the way that parents model to their kids. And then, we have these built-in narratives, these parts of us that believe that certain things are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to remember that anything that we talk about psychologically, that can be negative or harmful, is a distortion of something that God built in us for a good reason. It's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk about this with Catholic mindfulness. It's like, okay, if our imagination can get hijacked to take us out of the here and now and time and space to create fantasy threats and problems that trigger our anxiety, let us not forget that God made our imagination to be able to commune with him outside of time and space, because he is the eternal outside of time and space. That's the proper understanding of the imagination. Well, just like we can learn from our parents, it's like, no matter, this is a big thing that I faced in my life, was like, okay, my parents were married for like 20 something years and then got divorced. And I had this part of me that was like, okay, even if you start off happy, even if it looks like things are going well, just wait till you hit the 24-year mark.
Yeah.
Because that's when it's going to fall apart. It's like, whoa, that's a deep narrative. I'm going to have to figure that one out, because I'm not going to sit around waiting 24 years till I feel peace.
Are you at like 12, year 12?
Yeah, we're at 12. Luckily, I worked this out pretty much before I got married. That's why I left the Friars. But I was like, I realized that was inside of me. So I learned from their example, and it was a miseducation.
Yeah.
So then I got to turn it around, and actually, my mom has since passed away. My dad is remarried, and in the church, and it's like, oh, there's light on the other side of darkness. There's the resurrection on the other side of death. There's like goodness and beauty, and those things go on the other side. And also, that's not the only story, but
Yeah.
God made us to learn. He gave us mirror neurons. He gave us introjects and all this fancy psychological psychobabble to understand how we learn from parents for a good reason.
The good stuff you're saying. There is good stuff we're learning from our parents.
Yeah, the good stuff from our parents, from our elders, from
Yeah.
people in culture and society. It's like we can strive to be like our heroes. We have
Yeah.
the idea, and it like pulls us out. So
Yeah.
we need to keep that in mind, that we are being formed by what we set apart from us. And as parents, we can say, well, we still have an incredible job to play, even though you're in the moment, on letting your kids go.
Yes.
And even letting them make mistakes, even letting them fall into sin,
Yeah.
away from the church, away from whatever. But like how you live your life is
Yeah.
the greatest parenting you're gonna give to them.
Yeah, that's the consolation. You have some
Right.
consolation in knowing that your modeling and your example is still impacting your kids, whether they know it or not.
Right.
It's so. I'd say, when you're raising your kids, how much more of the parenting actually takes place from the modeling than it does what you verbally say to your kids.
Like all of it.
Yeah, we think about people discuss like, oh, I became like my mom or I became like my dad. I said I was never going to do this. It's like, well, why is that? I got to make a quick sports analogy. Like when I'm playing basketball, if I'm out on the court with myself and a ball and just me in the hoop, I am so creative. I'm so free. I'm doing new moves I've never done before, round the back, hook shots. Like, you'd think I was like an amazing, amazing player. But when a game starts, which moves do? I do the moves that I have practiced the most, because in the face of all the stimulus and all the anxiety and all the stress of the moment, I revert to the most practiced behavior. So when you're a child, analogously, when you're a child, when the stress comes, you're going to do that which you saw the most of, that which was modeled for you the most. That's why we become like our parents and do the same things that our parents did to us. And now there's hope, there's free will. This is what our mentorship provides. We open up vistas for new possibilities of relating to people. But that's why we become like our parents, because of the modeling feature that's far more impactful than what you verbally say to your children.
Yes, exactly. It's so much more, and for better, for worse.
Yes, for better,
It's
for
like
worse.
and that's why like your own conversion is so important. The way you live your life is what's most important. Every parent, every single person, everybody, every single person listening to this right now, the way you live your life, how seriously you take your holiness, your conversion, your integrated humanity is the most important thing for literally every other aspect of your life.
Because people are watching, and especially your kids are watching.
Yes, especially your people are watching. Now we're making everybody a little paranoid.
No, but that's true. That's true in general. I mean, I know myself, like I may admire someone, I may respect someone that's living a good and virtuous life, but that doesn't mean I show that to them.
Right.
Like I may through whatever my own psychology, however that's filtered, it doesn't mean I'm like, I don't know, always the best to them or deferential to them verbally in a conversation. I don't always let them know how much I respect what they're doing, but somewhere in my psyche might be that's something I want to work towards. And they never even know about it.
Exactly. I mean, this principle is so deeply embedded everywhere. And this is where all the life coaches and the sort of like all the stuff for like money, like all these like, I don't know, Tony Robbins and like they're like, the 5 people you surround yourself with are going to be your choice for how you move forward. And we can be limited by the people around us and the examples that we let into our interior hearts and minds, or we can be elevated by and brought out of ourselves and see the greatness of possibilities, which I think relates right back to Jesus. It's like wherever 2 or 3 or more are gathered in my name. What is he really saying there? It's not just like some spiritual formula that it's like, oh, let's put 1 + 1 + 1. Okay, now we have 2 or 3. Okay, click. We've activated, next level status. It's like, no. Psychologically, this makes sense. If we have 2 or 3 people, we're saying like, okay, there's other people besides yourself, and you're together in his name. So the sort of focus and content of that communion is Christ, who's greater than all of us. And now you have people gathered together for something aspirational. What does it do? It takes us out of ourself and it helps us become better versions of ourselves.
Yes.
This is a deep principle of our psychology. God made us like that, and then he told us about it because Christ reveals man to himself and makes his divine calling clear. So he made us in his image. Then he came into the world to show us how to be. And he said, okay, listen, everybody, I built this into your psyche. This is in your operating system. So just get together with other people in my name, and that is going to give you what you need to become the saints that I'm calling you to become.
Yeah. If one member of that triad or dyad or triad, if their gaze moves away from Christ, it's reinforced by the fact that the other people are still locked in.
Yeah, you keep everybody moving in that direction.
Yeah. It's very good.
That's why the disciples had to go out 2 by 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if we're stuck in ourself because of concupiscence, we all have a tendency towards distortion, and we're going to naturally gravitate. It's like the alignment on our car is off. If you let go of the steering wheel, it's going to naturally, you're going to start to veer to the left. We need each other, and then we keep each other lined up straight, and we will continue. Think about how beautiful that is.
This is a wonderfully aspirational discussion.
But how beautiful is it? It's like on our own, we all veer off the road, but all we have to do is just get together.
Yeah. And
as soon as we're just together in his name, we're all now on the straight and narrow, and we're all growing into the saints that we're called to become.
Even just psychologically, like you can tell the difference between when something's just bouncing around your own head and the moment you articulate to someone, it immediately changes.
It's
immediately.
True. Everything becomes bigger,
our emotions,
clearer, wider, expansive.
Even our like just trying to solve problems or be responsible for something or share an emotion. As soon as it becomes shared, it morphs into something new.
Yeah. So think about like what happens with depression, even anxiety. Like it closes us in on ourselves. We isolate from others.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive to reach out to others when you're depressed. You just want to lock in.
And the more you do that, the worse it gets. Because the alignment gets worse and the veering off. Now you're hitting the side of the road. Now you're bumping over the edge. Every little rock, every divot now takes your car, and you're off the road.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Next topic.
How full is our mailbag? We still got.
Oh, we got questions for days. We're doing pretty well today. We've got last one we only went through three questions, so we're moving at a good clip here. This might take longer than 10 minutes.
Okay.
So this is in reference to the Being Human podcast episode you had while interviewing Dr. Jerry Crete regarding internal family systems.
Love Dr. Crete. Dr. Jerry Crete is awesome.
He's awesome. I don't know if we have time to explain all of Part's work in 10 minutes, but here's a question specifically related to that discussion you had. So there was a statement that was most people have extreme self-loathing. The question is, what does it mean if you have a visceral aversion to discussions of these sorts of topics?
Well, first of all, I mean, not everybody has extreme self-loathing. I think first off the bat, I don't want to trigger parts for other people who are like, do I have self-loathing? I don't know.
I believe Dr. Jerry said something to that effect about most.
Oh, did he say that in the pot? Okay.
Most people have extreme self-loathing.
Well, I want to at least qualify that for our audience to say, if you're not in touch with your self-loathing part, it's okay. Maybe it's not as clear a part of your system.
Would you say everyone has a self-loathing part? I would say not everyone has that part.
I don't know. I guess it's not. Let's clarify. The self-loathing is a characteristic that can come from the part. I think we might all have parts that could give rise to a feeling of self-loathing.
Yes.
So we all might have the same kind of parts, but I don't know that everybody's expresses itself in the same way that they would describe as self-loathing.
Yes.
So that might be a common experience, and I think probably, if Dr. Creet's talking about, and I would say the same thing. People he works with as a psychologist, we have sort of a biased sample size.
Yes.
We're not talking about all humans.
Yeah, these are people who are in pain.
People in pain, and
Yeah.
a lot of times that does show up as some kind of self-loathing or self-criticism, self-hatred. It could be just like, I have parts that very often I can just sense in myself, like, I just don't like myself.
Yes.
It's like, it's just a deep sense of like this, like, there's some critical voice in me, some nagging, something's coming up inside of me. So I wouldn't say it's the same severity of self-loathing. That's a pretty dark word. But I would say if you have a visceral reaction to this or any other part, the way to understand that is it's another part that for good reason is averse to letting that negative part be felt, be thought about, be heard, be present.
Subjectively a good reason. So like from the subjective perspective of that part.
So and part of the part system is that every part is good. Every part is understandable. Every part has a good purpose.
Because we are made good.
So and therefore we're made good.
We're pursuing, every single part of us is pursuing something good. This is like Thomas Aquinas here, St. Thomas Aquinas. We're always pursuing a good. We may miss the mark, right? We may miss the bullseye, but we're always pursuing God who is good in our pursuit of lowercase g goods. So we might confuse the pleasure of eating with God. So, and I might think that the pleasure that comes from eating is an end. So I have 4 cheeseburgers, right? So you might say immorally, like from a moral standpoint, that's like the sin of gluttony or something like that. But from the subjective experience of my part that wants those 4 cheeseburgers, like pursuit of pleasure, which is a gift from God, is good.
Right.
It is good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the best example I just love using in the movie Inside Out. I mean, we have, all these characters in this girl's head, and it drives her decisions and the way she thinks and feels. And you have one character is for going back to the first movie, is sadness. And then you have joy, who's like always like bubbly and the one that's usually trying to drive the bus here. And joy does not like sadness. And she's like, so she's sort of resistant to letting sadness be part of the system. So she's like, oh, okay, sadness, you go over here in this corner, and she draws a circle on the floor, and she's like, you stand right here.
It's a classic repression.
You don't move out of this circle.
Yeah.
And that's like, okay, does joy have an understandable purpose in doing that? Sure. Who wants sadness to take over? But what we learned from the movie is that sadness has a really important part to play. And if we can actually listen to and understand and then meld together and integrate all the different parts, then there's a healthier way of operating. And so in the same way you can think about, that visceral reaction against self-loathing, if that's one of the parts that's inside, it's understandable to go put it in its circle and be like, you stay over here.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure how much like IFS theory we should get into here. Like, I wonder if we should have started with like big picture what IFS is for some of our listeners who are kind of entering into the conversation. But what you were just talking about, it's not that the self, which is distinct from our parts, would not have aversion to a part. What we're talking about here is a part having aversion to a part. So joy having a problem with sorrow.
Right. So for the person asking the question, they said, like, I'm having what if there's a visceral reaction to talking about self-loathing parts? Yeah. Well, if that person has already heard enough and he can understand very simply that when you say I'm having a visceral reaction, we just want to apply parts to everything. Part of me is having a visceral reaction to another part of me.
That is self-loathing.
That is self-loathing. And that's how you can start to structure and understand the way that you're feeling about these things. That if you're from self, if it's really the true I, then you would have curiosity about different parts that pop up, all the 8 C's. You'd have compassion, you'd have clarity. So when you feel or hear about or have a thought about a self-loathing part, you might say, I'm curious about this part. I wonder where it comes from. I wonder, isn't it, in compassion, it's like, isn't it sad to feel this about myself?
Yeah.
If this was somebody else's system, it'd be like, I see the goodness and beauty of who you are. I feel sad for
Yeah.
you that you
Yeah.
have this part inside of you.
Yeah. And what is the good that part is pursuing that is manifesting in self-loathing? Like
Right.
what's underneath the self-loathing that is good?
Exactly. And that's the curiosity. Instead of saying, now, oh, I have compassion on you for feeling that way, so therefore kick it out. No, it's I have compassion to feel that you feel that way, or I feel that way. So let's
Yeah.
understand it better. Let's get underneath it with curiosity, and then
Yeah.
have clarity in where it's coming from.
Yeah. It's an amazing experience that we have when we have compassion for parts that other parts of us reject. There's like this opening up within us
Yes.
when a particular part is validated that formerly another part didn't like or didn't want to allow to speak. It's just like the integration process is it offers us so much peace and so much relief and like expansion of our interior experience.
I would say if you're like, there's nothing that has helped my marriage more than parts understanding in terms
Mhm.
of conflicts and resolving conflicts. When I
Yeah.
can remain in self and keep that self space open, and then instead of hearing something that my wife is saying through the lens of triggering my parts, and then I need to defend or argue or eradicate from the conversation a certain thing, and I can instead have curiosity.
Yes.
Oh, maybe I disagree with what she's saying, but why is she saying it? Where is it coming from? What part of her is feeling something that maybe has nothing to do with me whatsoever? And maybe I'm right that it's actually not actually what's going on between us. But I don't need to prove that point right now because it's coming from a real part of her.
Yeah.
So if I can have curiosity and compassion and calm and connection and all these things, all of a sudden a fight turns into a deepening of intimacy and vulnerability. And it's
Yep.
beautiful, all these opportunities for growing together through the difficulties. If so, I really encourage anybody listening to go to the Being Human podcast, look up CatholicPsych.com/podcast, and we have a search function there. You can actually put in parts or internal family systems, learn more about how this works. It's incredibly powerful, which is why we
Yeah.
use it in our mentorship. It's why we're using it and talking about it so much.
Yeah. And I mean, and also you could just if you start to think this way, the amount of compassion, like you allow yourself access to different parts of yourself when you just start using this language. Like when you say a part of me rather than use the word I, it's amazing. So if I were to say, I hate the Los Angeles Lakers and everyone part of that organization, like if I said that, you'd be like, what's wrong with this guy? But you might say that anyway. But if I start to say like there's a part of me that hates the Los Angeles Lakers. Now it's something manageable to explore. Like, why would there be a part of me that doesn't like a professional basketball team and the
Right.
organization versus like, it's ridiculous for me to just say like with all of myself, it is a definitive statement that the Los Angeles Lakers are bad. Like,
Yeah.
no, maybe we can get into like why as a Celtics fan and why sports were important to me growing up and competition and validation through success and achievement and me living vicariously through whatever. But it starts the conversation if we start thinking of things in parts language.
Absolutely. It goes from the heaviest and deepest parts of life to the lightest and
Yes.
most enjoyable parts of life, like hating sports teams.
That's right. All right, 12 o'clock. Good job by you, Dr. Greg.
Welcome to the week, everybody. Hope you have a great week. See you
Yes.
on Wednesday.
On whatever Wednesday. It's Mailbag Monday. Oh, yeah. Mailbag questions. Get them in. Mailbag@CatholicPsych.com. Email us questions. We also take questions from comments. So we scour the comments below this video. If you don't actually want to go over to your email and hit the little pencil and put in the subject line mailbox.
It's a lot of work.
Just want to write on this. I know it's a lot of work, but we want to hear from you. We want to engage with you. And yeah, we look forward to Mondays, generally speaking. Mondays, we're going to answer your questions.
God bless you all.